Ukrainian expert Ivan Yakovina named the moment when the Russian army could rebel if Ukrainian troops break through the Russian front somewhere. Of course, I understand that it is premature to talk about this now, but the situation at the front is constantly changing, and theoretically, this cannot be ruled out. This could lead to some Russian units disobeying their command, because soldiers and officers in Russia simply hate their leaders, their commanders, and we know this from the huge number of videos, posts and Telegram channels that these Russian military themselves run. Even the complete lack of water in Donetsk and the Donetsk region has already become a political factor in the discontent of Russian troops. This causes angry posts not only from the civilian population, but also from the Russian military who are there. The political observer expressed his opinion. They are also terribly unhappy with the events that are taking place, and at some point, I don't know what is going to happen. Something might crack. Some unexpected event might occur and set off a whole chain of events that will lead to some kind of riot or some kind of uprising or something like that, because the potential for this is very great, Ivan Yakovina added to the above. The expert noted an important nuance. Or there is another version of the crisis that could turn the Russian system of power upside down, a partly predictable crisis. This is, of course, the death of Ramzan Kadyrov. In Chechnya, after the death of its current leader, an internal struggle for power will certainly break out. And the most interesting thing is that the Russian Federation will not be able to participate in this struggle for power, simply because all Russian troops are now in Ukraine. Ivan Yakovina also commented on the strange interest of Russian legislators in the topic of occultism. He believes that the official recognition of the existence of Satan by state authorities in the Russian Federation can only mean one thing. Putin is preparing something terrible, for example, a mass murder or some other serious crime. In my opinion, Putin takes this whole story quite seriously. That is, he does not take it as a joke. The fact that this satanic movement was banned, he needed it for some reason. Of course, I do not know why this might be needed because I do not have a very large amount of knowledge in this area. But for Putin, taking into account all sorts of occult things that have long been practiced in the Kremlin and around the Kremlin in general, for Putin, all this is quite serious. The journalist expressed his point of view. Ivan Yakovina explained in more detail what all this could mean. In short, I assume that Putin is preparing some kind of large-scale mass murder or some other large-scale crime under all this cover. In Russia, it has been the case for a long time that the authorities forbid their people what they themselves really want to do. So they forbid all sorts of foreign words, LGBT, or in this case they forbid Satanism. Why do they forbid it? Because the people can't. The authorities not only can, but they really want it.
Ukraine has received the first batch of US-made Patriot air defense systems days after President Donald Trump's announcement of a new military aid package worth $10 billion to Kyiv, Telegraph publication reported on Friday. According to the report, thanks to US agreement with Germany, the Patriot anti-aircraft missile system and other interceptor missiles arrived in Ukraine by the end of last week. The Pentagon and the White House used the move to try to persuade European countries to take a risk by sending their existing stockpiles to Kyiv. However, for some countries, this is a difficult task, given that their Patriot missiles will not be replaced until early next year. Earlier this week, Germany announced an agreement with Washington to transfer 5 more batteries to Ukraine. Berlin will provide funds for 2 systems, while Norway has promised to pay for a third. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Kyiv currently has agreements on 3 Patriot air defense systems out of the 10 needed. However, missiles, drones, electronic warfare systems and stable funding for the army are also needed. Zelensky recalled that US leader Donald Trump agreed to transfer the systems to Ukraine. Ukrainians took to the streets for a second day to protest a new law they say weakens Ukraine's anti-corruption watchdogs. According to Associated Press, the legislation, which has also drawn rebukes from European Union officials and international rights groups, has put increased pressure on President Volodymyr Zelensky and endangered his public support at a critical phase of the war. Discontent over the law led to the first major demonstration against the government in more than 3 years of war, marking the most serious fracture yet in the national unity that has helped Ukraine resist Russia's invasion. In Kyiv, thousands of people gathered near the Ukrainian presidential office to protest against the law. The problem of corruption is directly related to all other problems, including war, said 21-year-old student Yaroslav Telenko. An attack on the anti-corruption system of the NABU and SAPO bodies is an attack on me personally, an attack on my friends who serve in the armed forces of Ukraine, so for me this is a red line, for me this is unacceptable. The legislation tightens government oversight of 2 key anti-corruption agencies. Critics say the step could significantly weaken the independence of those agencies and give Zelensky's circle greater influence over investigations. Zelensky acknowledged the protests and criticism in his nightly address Wednesday, and he said government and law enforcement agencies had agreed to come up with specific steps to strengthen the rule of law in Ukraine. Those recommendations, he said, would lead to a bill he would propose to Parliament to safeguard the autonomy of the agencies.
Проблема корупції напряму пов'язана з усіма іншими проблемами, зокрема і з війною. На мою думку, корупція призводить до вбивств, вона призводить до провалів на фронті, тому корупцію мусимо викорінювати на законодавчому рівні. Напад на антикорупційну систему органів, на НАБУ і САП – це напад на мене особисто, це напад на моїх знайомих, які служать у Збройних силах. Тому для мене це червона лінія, для мене це неприпустимо. І мені здається, що наративи про роз'єднання країни, наративи про те, що люди тут розхитують човен – це абсурд. Тому що влада розхитує човен.